Ms. Pérez, as I look at your career, I see the career of someone who has been an activist, and I believe a radical activist. You have waged litigation campaigns and opposed voter ID laws. You have opposed voter integrity laws. You have opposed prohibitions on ballot harvesting. You have advocated for felons being able to vote. As I look at your record year after year after year of being an extreme partisan advocate, I'm left with the very likely conclusion that if you were confirmed to the bench, you would likewise be a radical activist on the bench. Voter ID laws, as Senator Lee just pointed out, you described as the greatest rollback of voting rights in this country. 80% of Americans support voter ID laws. 60% of African Americans support voter ID laws. Do you believe voter ID laws are constitutional?
Senator Cruz, the Supreme Court has said that there are no per se restrictions against voter ID laws in Crawford.
I asked what you believe. I was one of the parties litigating in Crawford, so I'm very well familiar with that case and led a coalition of states defending voter ID laws, and Justice Stevens wrote the majority opinion upholding Indiana's voter ID law. My question to you is, do you believe voter ID laws are constitutional?
Senator, I believe they are constitutional. I believe that they can be constitutional because the Supreme Court has said they can be constitutional, and in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court gets to decide. That is what our system depends on. We have a concept of vertical stare decisis. We have rules of law. We have precedent.
Ms. Pérez, just a couple of months ago, in March of 2021, you said that the voter ID laws that had been passed were due to, I'm going to quote you to get your words right, anxiety over the browning of America, and people having anxiety of the fact that certain folks in power are not going to be able to stay in power. Do you believe the 80% of Americans who support voter ID laws and the 60% of African Americans who support voter ID laws are doing so because they're concerned about the browning of America?
Senator, that quote is clearly referring to politicians. It's not referring to African Americans.
Which politicians here do you believe are concerned about the browning of America?
Senator, that context was with respect to state politicians.
So it's only state politicians?
Senator, that context that I'm on record for, we're referring to state politicians.
All right, well, let's talk about politicians here in this body. As you know, I filed an amicus brief on behalf of 11 senators in the Brnovich case. You made a comment that the brief that I filed was outrageous and harmful. Do you stand by that characterization?
Senator, the Supreme Court, as you know, issued its decision in the Brnovich case and struck down, and upheld the restrictions on Arizona.
Okay, I'd like you to answer my question. Do you stand by the characterization that the amicus brief that I filed on behalf of 11 senators was? That's how you characterized it.
Senator, the Supreme Court has issued its ruling on
I'm going to try again. Do you stand by your characterization? I'm not asking you what the Supreme Court did. You described an amicus brief filed on behalf of 11 senators as outrageous and harmful. Do you stand by what you said just a few months ago?
Senator, what I said as an advocate when it was pending before the court is not relevant to the issue before you.
Do you stand by it or do you retract it? You have a choice.
Senator, as an advocate, I pursue.
Okay, you're going to refuse to answer me on that. I assume you also believe the Supreme Court's 6-3 decision agreeing with the position advocated in my amicus brief. I assume you believe that decision was also outrageous and harmful because that's the language you used.
Senator, the Brnovich case is the law of the land. It has been settled.
So you're not going to answer that either?
The law of the land has been settled. What I am going to say, Senator, is that I am pledging to apply precedent.
So at the time you discussed the brief filed by a number of senators on this committee as outrageous and harmful. At that time, had you had any discussions with the Biden administration about being nominated to be a judge?
I would need to remember the timing a little bit.
When was the first discussion you had with the Biden administration about being nominated to be a judge?
I would need to reference my Senate Judiciary questionnaire because that's where I recorded it. I don't have it committed to memory.
So you have advocated that felons should be able to vote. Do you believe all felons should vote?
Senator, my work and advocacy has been on behalf of persons who are living and working in the community.
Do you believe currently incarcerated prisoners in jail should be allowed to vote?
Senator, I have been advocating on behalf of people who are...
You're not answering my question. I didn't ask what you've advocated in the past. I'm asking what you believe.
Senator, the canons of judicial ethics preclude me from answering that question because a situation may come before me.
So let me ask you this. You have advocated in favor of a living constitution, and indeed, as both Senator Hawley and Senator Lee asked you about, you have disparaged those who believe in originalism as essentially racist and bigots. How do you think you will be able to serve with colleagues on the Court of Appeals if you have disparaged their constitutional interpretation as racist and bigoted? And secondly, why is it that when you advocate a, quote, living constitution, that somehow the livingness of it always makes the Constitution agree with the policy positions you happen to embrace? How is that consistent with democracy, to have a judge able to implement whatever policy positions you believe in?
Senator, we have had more than 24 amendments added to the Constitution since it was ratified in 1788.
But that's not what a living constitution is. A living constitution means you as a judge, if you're a judge, can change it to whatever you want, and that the voters don't get to speak on it. Isn't that right?
Senator, women now have the right to vote.
We passed an amendment for that. That's a terrific victory, and it was done the right way through an amendment. A living constitution is judges changing it. Why is judges changing the Constitution to meet their policy preferences, consistent with any respect for the democratic process and the ability of voters to decide policy issues?
Senator, it is clear that our great Constitution is one that is enduring. It is clear with things like Brown versus Board overruling Plessy versus Ferguson that evolution happens. It is also clear that our great Constitution establishes separation of powers. There are bodies like this one that engage in policymaking. There are judges that review the cases and controversies that are put before them. I am pledging, by accepting this nomination, that I am going to cease being an advocate, and I would impartially, without reservation, objectively apply the law to the facts of the case and controversy before me.
Well, your record is overwhelmingly to the contrary.